So I think we'll go ahead and get started, and this meeting is being recorded. I know some folks said that they had a schedule conflict, so I'll go ahead and share this recording when we're done so they can watch it if they'd like to. But first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for logging on. I know this is something new and just kind of trying it out. And so I wanted to kind of kick it off, and I made a couple of slides so that I make sure I say what I want to say. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Um, and ultimately, I wanted to go ahead and spend this and introduce myself first of all, because I know I have not met everybody here. But basically, this is an idea that a couple of different county agents expressed interest in, and I'm hoping that we can all get together and kind of be as efficient as possible and share what we've got going on. So, wanted to start with just some objectives of why I was hoping this meeting would be helpful. So, really having some specialists provide statewide updates of what they're seeing and limiting this to grain crops primarily, but overall, Virginia agriculture, what's going on right now, being mid-July. So, basic agronomy as well as soil fertility, pathology, weed science, and just some regional updates. And so I wanted to kind of get started, and then I'll really let everybody kind of roundtable about what's going on and what they think is useful information for everybody. And also if anybody has any questions that they've got coming up. So I know I've been talking to a few different county agents, and some oddities have been popping up across the state, but nothing too widespread, but really just wanted to facilitate that discussion and collaboration between all of us. So I'm hoping this will be useful. But anyways, I wanted to start by introducing myself. So my name is Carrie Wortell, and I started on April 10th of this year as the soybean extension specialist. And so I am at the Tidewater AREC, and I wanted to kind of give you an update of my background and also the season so far. So I grew up in Northern Virginia and went to Virginia Tech, and then went on and pursued graduate degrees at the University of Arkansas in soil fertility. So that's primarily my background, but I also spent 2 years as a county extension agent in Pitt County, North Carolina. So a little bit about me there without spending too much time, but I want to summarize also my first 3 months here have had some challenges. And so I'm sure y'all have also had these same issues arise, but having some deer damage, some slug damage in the plots. We also had some seedling diseases at both Blackstone and the Tidewater AREC for the soybean OVTs. We've seen some nutrient deficiencies pop up, had some, quite a bit of horse nettle in some of my plots. And off to a better note, the double crop looks good so far. So anyways, it's been a challenging spring. I know I'm not alone in that, so I want to just share some pictures of what I have seen and also give some updates, because I know the biggest challenge that we're all facing is the weather. So as far as soybeans and temperature, wanted to share, the optimum growth for the optimum temperature for growth and development for soybean is 78. So we have obviously been meeting that every day. So we have been fulfilling those requirements, and more of the concern is those high temperatures. And so one of the big questions that was being asked was, should I plant double crop beans with those high temperatures that we were experiencing in June? So dug up some of Dr. Holzhauser's old research and found he kind of recommended, if your soil temps are being consistently above 90 degrees, we're going to be reducing our germination. So also, as we're moving on, making sure that we're reading those labels and considering the risk of burn if we're spraying anything in these hot, dry periods. So going back to the soil temps, basically went out and on June 25th, found about 11-degree temperature difference between if we had wheat residue or conventional till ground, but we were meeting that 90-degree threshold. So folks did plant into this, and I think we're able to get away with it because we ended up getting that rain, but it was kind of a bit of a big question there as to how that would turn out for them. And then the big one is weather and sorry, water. So I wanted to share some preliminary data from my PhD research, which was looking at in-season potassium applications to soybean. So I took out the potassium treatments and just summarized this across different growth stages. If we have drought stress at different growth stages, what our grain yield looks like, where 100% is no water stress at all. And this was a turf shelter trial. So this was not large scale by any means, but basically wanted to share with you, during those vegetative growth stages, that drought, it's got an impact, but it's not too severe. And I'm starting to get worried, as we get into these reproductive stages, that we are going to be losing some more yield if the drought persists. So with that being said too, some nutrient deficiencies are popping up. A lot of that might be from lack of soil moisture. And so when we see those, we also want to consider the soil test reports to make sure, is that nutrient deficiency actually occurring because it is deficient, or is it occurring because that plant doesn't have the ability to take it up? So kind of thinking whole system there. And then also, one thing to consider too is for those more progressive growers who are really trying to chase that high yield, considering some hidden hunger effects as well. So biggest concern there is potassium for in-season hidden hunger. And then I also wanted to share this. So this came across, I think, all of our emails yesterday, but this was the updated drought map. So down at the Suffolk station, we're considered no drought. And I think that's because of the recent rains we have been given. And so that's encouraging, but some parts of the state is still in extreme drought. So curious to hear from y'all and in different parts of the state to kind of validate that. But I also want to just share my information. So for those of y'all who I have not met, I hope to meet you soon and look forward to working together. I wanted to share my contact information here. And I've got a survey, so I'm going to put this in the chat. But basically this survey is, asking if this is helpful to y'all, if it is, how it can be best implemented, so that if we decide to make this a continual meeting of grain crop specialists and agents in Virginia, what's the best way to do that. So today I kind of figure we'll get started, got to start somewhere, and we'll hopefully move up from here. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll put that survey in the chat for y'all to fill out when you are ready, and I will pass the baton to the next person. I'll call you out if needed. I can call out Dr. Ryder.
Well, I had a question for you actually first before.
Yeah.
I was
What you got?
Gary. So on your drought stress soybeans, that data you showed, like this is a dumb question, but how drought stressed was it? I mean, did your soil moisture get down like 10% volumetric water content or what?
Yeah, it was 50% field capacity. So it was visible drought stress. But again, this was also small scale. So these were grown in 5-gallon buckets so that we could water them to weight and everything. And so that's how we did that. So it wasn't necessarily the worst case scenario for drought stress, but it was a pretty good drought. And we sustained that for 21 days was our length of time. So by the end of it, it looked pretty sorry.
Okay, so like your R was R1, you were like 20% yield reduction by saying a 21-day drought. It's kind of the number you saw.
Yes. And then getting down to, I believe the worst was the seed fill. Let me pull that back up. So if we go back down here. So yeah, that seed fill period of that R5 to R6, we were down to about 65% relative grain yield. So it was pretty much a steady stair step of a loss. And this is a summary because there was also interactions going on between the potassium treatments that were applied and the different soils. So the one thing that I'm glad you brought this up, because I didn't mention, is a better nutrient rich soil and more fertilizer was able to help alleviate the drought stress. But we had a ton of interaction, so I just summarized it in the one here.
So higher potassium concentrations did reduce drought stress.
Yes, they did reduce the yield loss. So if you had good nutrition, you were able to sustain a little bit more stress there.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, go ahead and take it over.
It didn't divert away from me, did it? Okay, yeah. I was hoping that would divert. All right. So I don't have any slides. I just thought I would give a quick update here. On the shore, we're of course dry. We haven't had as much rain as y'all have had across the state. We've been pretty drought stressed now. Gosh, for what, last 12 weeks, Doug? Is that right? Around or so. We've had a couple inches of rain. And so the biggest question we're getting related to grain at this point in time is related to corn. There's been some questions and interest about what can farmers who have drought stressed corn do if you happen to start getting rain. In the south end of the shore here in Northampton County, we had several growers that had 2 1.5-inch rains about 4 days apart. And so now there's a little bit of hope, even though the corn's still 3 feet tall, tasseled and silt. And so if you look at the data, there's still nothing really you can do from a fertility standpoint or plant additive standpoint. So y'all might get that question. I know as always, there's a lot of materials being sold for like drought stress, for like foliar applications or for soil applications. And so there's been work done on the soil side of things. We still have nothing really you can add to the soil, pre-plant that really does anything for soil moisture. And there's certainly nothing fertility wise that you can apply that'll really help either. What I was stressing to the farmers down the road here is that the nutrients are still there, probably more so this year than in a normal year because we haven't had the leaching rains. And so if you're seeing some sort of deficiency, it's really too late to correct in corn at this point. So that's the biggest question I've had as far as from a fertility standpoint in corn. So with that, I will pass the baton on, Carrie.
Thanks, Dr. Ryder. All right. Dr. Flesner, how about you? Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So I don't have slides either, but I do have a few things I might put in the chat here. A couple of them are sort of on the tangentially related to grains here. So the noxious weed list was updated effective July 4th. And so there's some new things on there that you might want to be aware of. So I'll just let you check that out, put that in the link there. The other thing that's sort of tangentially related is the Chinese fountain grass issue we see keep expanding in our pastures and hay fields. Most of that's west of I-95, particularly in the Piedmont region, but also in the Mountain Valley. So hopefully you saw an email went out to the VCE listserv last week, somewhere in there. Okay, more things more directly related would be as we get to start thinking about cover crops and the weather conditions that we've had being dry, the potential for herbicide carryover to cover crops is there. So, in general, it's highly specific between what herbicide was applied and the species of cover crop that was being planted. But if we have things like dry weather, it's less favorable for herbicide degradation. So this would be a year where we're more likely to see that show up. So something you might want to have people consider when they're making those cover crop species decisions. We have some tables in the pest management guide, and I'm going to put those in here in the chat where they are. It's basically at the end of the corn chapter, at the end of the soybean chapter, and then the cotton chapter. And there's a column in there that's fall planted cover crops, what's okay and what do we have concern for. And there's some other comments in there that you can explore there. But hopefully that's a good resource in there to make you aware of to inform some of those decisions. If you got other questions about that, let me know. I guess the other thing I had in my notes here to mention would be that time between application and planting is big, the weather conditions, but also one thing I think is a lot of these cover crops are being broadcasted and turbo-tilled in, and that seed just being on the soil surface, I think, is making it more susceptible to some herbicide carryover compared to drilling that cover crop in. So that might be another consideration to make people aware of. Last thing I wanted to mention was dicamba and the Extend Flex system. So many of you guys know we had a stop sale went out on that. So then the use of existing stocks. So you had to buy product by May 30th, which is gone, and use it by June 30th, which is already gone. And so kind of where are we now as we move into maybe starting to think about what kind of seed to purchase for next year. So both Ingenia and XtendiMax, those Bayer and BASF have submitted new labels for those products to EPA. I think both comment periods are over, and they're kind of moved into the EPA's, what's a typical timeline for this product, I'm told, is 15 months. And there might be an additional comment period at the end of that. So if you do the math right now, from when things were submitted, we're not going to have those legal way to put dicamba over the top next year. So if you're thinking about, if you've used dicamba and are relying on that for weed control, really the Enlist system and substituting 2,4-D for the dicamba is going to be the best system there. If you're using Extend Flex crops, but not using dicamba, right, you're just relying on the Roundup and Liberty and other herbicides available in those, then, you could still, Extend Flex seed is still going to be on the market. But, the Roundup and Liberty Lake GT27, there's several platforms that have both the glyphosate and the glufosinate or Liberty tolerance out there. So just keep that in mind, that we're probably not going to have dicamba next year, and I think that's a pretty safe bet to move forward with that. Yeah, that's what I had. Any questions for me? Do I call out the next person then, Carrie? Is that
all right? Thanks, Dr. Flesner. Dr. Langston, are you ready?
Yeah, I reckon I'm ready. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to, but let me know if you have any troubles.
Can you guys see that?
I do not see that. Let me look here. If you'll try again, I just changed some settings. There we go.
So what I want to show you is I'm working on a new corn disease in Virginia. Actually, this corn disease is everywhere in the U.S. Hasn't been formally named, or so you're really not going to hear a whole lot about it. But I'm doing a survey in Virginia this year, where I'm trying to locate as many fields as possible to try to see how widespread it is. If you see this first picture here, this is kind of when disease is starting out. You'll see these lines or clusters of very tiny spots. Now, if you're familiar with what curvularia looks like on corn, these spots are actually smaller than the little curvularia spots, and they're kind of pinkish, almost reddish in appearance. So some people might be able to confuse it with southern rust. But this is what it looks like when it's getting started. See if I can get the other picture to come up. Here's a closer picture, kind of a close-up. You can see those little necrotic flecks. And with more advanced stages of disease, you start to get these areas coalesce. You can almost see a pattern where the spots will follow the leaf veins. So if you see this, let me know. I might get you to send me a sample, but I'd certainly like to be able to get the location of where you saw this. The best place to look in cornfields is on the edges of the field. It seems to be more prevalent where sunlight hits a whole corn plant. We don't know if this causes much yield loss or not. I've had trials where fungicides do work on it, but we haven't been able to record any yield loss with it yet. But I'm working with some larger plots this year. Mainly just want to make you aware of this, something that keep your eye out for when you're looking at corn or or anything. But it is a new disease. Hasn't been described yet. We're pretty close to being able to put something formally out on this, but not quite ready yet. As far as other diseases and other crops, We hadn't gotten a lot of calls in. I know there's might be some questions about spraying soybeans with fungicides. Typically what we would recommend is if you choose to spray soybeans with a fungicide, we recommend sprays at R3 to R5 or beginning pod and full pod. I can't guarantee you that you'll get a yield bump from those fungicide applications, but I do know that if you spray, you've got a better chance of getting a return on investment by spraying at R3 to R5. Not seeing a whole lot in peanuts yet. It's a little too soon to see diseases in peanuts. I think most growers have put out their first leaf spot application. Typically, I see leaf spot or sclerotinia blight get started cranking in August, typically around mid-August, sometimes in early August, depending on how big the vines are. Haven't seen much going on with cotton. I know most of you probably don't deal with cotton. Certainly, there's some fields that will have some nematode problems. But generally foliar diseases aren't something we think about with cotton. So unless that's what I have, if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
I've got one.
Yeah.
What's the I mean, what are you looking at in terms, I mean, you have any estimates of like yield loss or anything like that? I mean, is this something that's of like economic concern, or is it?
I don't know if it's of economic concern yet. I don't. I haven't been able to document any statistical yield loss with this. What I think mainly some of the purpose may be just to be able to diagnose it correctly. I know
Sure.
some people have diagnosed it as an abiotic disorder. Some have accused herbicide spray drift as being a problem, but we've actually been able to isolate and identify the pathogen. It's just that we're not ready to go public with it yet. We're trying to get more information on it. I do have large strip trials out this year with and without fungicide to try to see if I can get some yield differences out of larger plots. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Langston. Dr. Higgins, you want to go next? Keep it on the disease.
That sounds good. Yeah, for those on the call who don't know me, my name is Doug Higgins. I'm an extension pathologist out here at the Eastern Shore. I work primarily on small grains and vegetables. So if you have any soybean or corn disease questions, I'm going to punch you over to Dr. Langston and Dr. Zhang over there. For the small grain wise, much of my what I guess I can talk about is related to Fusarium head blight management through the use of fungicides. Some updates that folks should be aware about is that Carumba, we're going to lose that as a fungicide option. The BASF has decided to stop manufacturing that product, so we can take that one off the list. And I think in time for next season, although it might not be here, there will be a new Mirvis product, will be Mirvis Era, will be coming out from Syngenta. It'll essentially have the same same SDHI on it, but its DMI will switch from proconazole propiconazole to prothioconazole. So they're just going to switch out the DMI, which is probably a good idea because the current partner in Moravis is the same active in tilt, and we don't see very much efficacy out of that. So the Maris Era would probably be, to slot in to replace that. What I've seen so far in the research trials, that kind of corresponds with what's been seen nationally. I put out the first year I came, I put out just straight up fungicide efficacy trials here, and then with Dr. Langston down at Tidewater, and then seeing stuff again this year here at the station and then out in 3 grower fields. You know, there are several effective options, you know, for fusarium head blight management. There's not just one product available. I think that's the point I want to emphasize. So Mirvizase is probably, from what I've heard, is one of the more popular ones. But in the efficacy trials, we're seeing Sparex, Proserio Pro, Proserio, and Proline kind of borders back and forth. But those products are all looking with similar efficacy when applied at that optimal timing of early flowering. And so that's kind of the question I've got going into the next season, is if some of these newer fungicides can give a little bit of an extended window, as we hear Mirvizase does. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the update from my end for the small grain portion. I guess there's one other thing I should touch on. We did have, you know, and maybe Nicholas will talk about it later, but there was a lot of, you know, we had kind of some widespread issues this past season with some stunting and some yellowing at flagleaf. And they were kind of over a broad geographical area. And sometimes the results would come back with yellow barley dwarf. Sometimes we wouldn't get the stunting like yellow barley dwarf, but we'd still get a positive hit. Other times I isolated Rhizoctonia. In some instances, you know, nothing came out. So there seemed like there was a variety of different things happening, but really that the widespread occurrence of it over multiple variety class made me really want to think about something environmental that was occurring. And that, you know, if we think about our past small grain season and the way that we started out dry, and then turned really wet really quickly. I think that's probably, you know, had a little bit of play in it with some poor root development, and plants started to stress, you know, around that flag leaf time. So it seemed like there are a bunch of different stuff happening there. You know, in each scenario, I guess my emphasis was treating each scenario uniquely, and trying to figure out, because we did see different stuff pop up with different folks. So I'm curious if people, I know we're a little ways out, but we'll see what happens for this next season. So thank you. If there's any questions, I try to take them. All right.
So can I ask you a question, Doug?
Yeah.
So are you pretty convinced that some of these sites were Rhizoctonia or Pythium or something like that, as opposed to BYD?
I'm more convinced of that they're abiotic because of how widespread, like, and across multiple cultivars we were seeing. Like, I mean, the Rhizoctonias were only in a couple samples. The barley yellow dwarf, it seemed to be very common. If Arash was on here, his student might be able to, or his postdoc might be able to give. What I saw coming back was that they had a lot of positive hits.
Yeah.
And I'm not an entomologist, so I don't know how widespread, you know, an outbreak, an insect outbreak can really be to cover it. But I think we can't ignore the abiotic stress part of it as well, especially for some of those stands where we didn't see a lot of stunting. We just saw the yellowing that was, you know, that early yellowing that was occurring. I don't know, Nicholas, what I come out of it was there wasn't really a clear answer, and each case seemed to be a little bit unique, but then we kept hearing it over a wide geographical area, right? Like, so for it to be a single soil-borne disease hitting everyone everywhere at the same time just doesn't add up for me. Like, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, we've gone back and forth. I mean, I went back and forth with some pathologists in Maryland, and they are convinced that it's abiotic. But I mean, I've looked at a lot of small grains over the years, and it looks like disease to me, and it looks viral, and like, I mean, it looks like BYD to me. Everything looked like BYD.
Right.
You know, and so I know that we were getting negative tests, but I was talking to Arash this morning, and he was saying basically everything they tested came back positive when they ran it through RT-PCR. So I'm wondering if there's something going on with the ELISA test that's not working. Maybe there's different, you know, a new race out there for whatever reason. I don't really know what's going on, but I mean, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. I'm still fairly, and especially in the wheat, I think I mean, I am thoroughly convinced what we were looking at was barley yellow dwarf, and it was really bad this year, and it was so bad that it was like uniform. It's very uniform. We didn't get these like kind of splotchy. I mean, we had in the state test, I was telling them, we had heritabilities for BYD scores that were in the 50s and 60s, which is really high for BYD. Usually BYD isn't heritable at all because it's so patchy. But I'm pretty convinced it's barley yellow dwarf at this point. Just after looking at thousands of plots this year, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, the thing that doesn't add for me is the widespread distribute, like how uniform the pattern is, and that doesn't track as well.
Yeah.
And my hackles go up when I see something that's that widespread, you know, in uniform, right? Like,
Yeah, and Arash mentioned that when they were looking for aphids, they weren't finding many aphids, but they were getting a lot of barley yellow dwarf. So I almost asked the question to him, like, do we have another vector? Or, you know, is there something, you know, something else going on?
Yeah.
Nicholas, I
Yeah.
have something to add on your comments on the ELISA test. So ELISA test is not that sensitive as the real-time RT-PCR.
Right.
So you may see a lot of false negative results compared to what Arash is doing at the Southern Piedmont Iraq. So they have developed a very sophisticated protocol. You can send your sample to his students to get the test done.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the only problem with RT-PCR is that like it'll pick it up no matter how little there is, right? So the question is that what's really causing the symptom?
I think that's real time. They are testing it compared to a positive, like maybe a
Okay.
standard curve.
And they can
So
look at
it's
the
not-
rate of fluorescence, and that tells them the relative quantity. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, it felt like a mystery this year. One interesting thing is that so we scored it in two locations. We scored it in Morrison, we scored it in Blackstone, and the genetic correlation between those is super low. The host genetic correlation. So the response in Blackstone was very, I mean, like 0.3, which is unusual, right? If I were to do that with, say, leaf rust or you know, mildew or something, those would be 0.8 or 0.9. They'd be super high. So I'm wondering if whatever this is either multiple things that are producing very similar, but I mean, especially in the wheat, I'm not going to say for sure in the barley, but in the wheat, I mean, barley yellow dwarf has a very distinct phenotype. The leaf starts to lose the chlorophyll content, and it does this kind of this twist and this lean over thing. And I mean, that's what it looked like. And I've looked at a lot of this stuff, you know, so I'm pretty convinced it was barley yellow dwarf. Now, whether or not that was the same thing we were seeing in the barley, I'm pretty convinced on that too. I don't know, but it's concerning, and I think it is something that we need to continue to keep an eye on, because it was bad this year. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So Nicholas, did you have anything else you were wanting to add? I think you kind of took it away there and had a good update.
Yeah, no, I mean, not in particular. I would just say that the small grain crop this year was, there was, in some places got pretty hot and dry right around heading and grain fill, and that reduced test weight quite a bit in certain areas. Some people got lucky and they had a you know, a rainstorm. Some, you know, even probably even a quarter or half an inch made a huge difference right in there. It wasn't super detrimental, and then we got enough rain after that it was fine. And then towards the end of the season, the spring was warm enough that everything was about 2 weeks ahead, 1 to 2 weeks ahead. And then And then it was all dry for like 6 straight weeks. So everyone got their weed out and no one got no one had any problems with, you know, reduced test weight or falling number for, you know, or at least further reduced test weight or, you know, bad falling number or anything. So the grain quality was really good this year. Conditional on, you know, you not having that problem, you know, right during that early grain fill period. But we saw, I think average test weights were in like, I mean, some locations were as low as 52, 53. I'd say average was probably like 56 or 57. I don't recall what it was across all of the locations, but it, you know, a typical year would be more like 58, 59. 59 is a little high. But that, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. All right. No, that's great. Thank you. And I guess we'll pass it to Dr. Oakes and see if he's got any other updates with the wheat harvest and everything he's got going on in Northern Neck.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to add to what Nick said. He covered pretty much with that with wheat. I'll just add in June from let's see, from May 3rd, 30th until June 25th, we only got a quarter of an inch of rain here. So while it helped out the small grain harvest, it definitely was detriment to the soybeans being planted. So while June was extremely dry, since June 25th, we've had close to 5 inches of rain since then. So stuff has started to recover quite a bit. The state variety test here looks very well right now. I mean, all things considering, the dry June did I reduced growth and development quite a bit, but group 3s and 4s are setting pods. They're getting close to R3 to R5. Some of the 3s are in R5. Group 5s are just starting to flower now. I might show a couple pictures here if I can of right one. Yeah, of Carrie's planting date study she has here. So she had 3 different planting dates of March 1st. I mean, excuse me, May 1st, May 19th, and June 7th. And this was May 1st. Of course, it looks the best. Then May 19th is not as good. You're getting a lot of weed pressure just because there hasn't been a canopy on 30-inch rows. And then that June 7th planting date, that's really suffered quite a bit. The emergence was very poor on that. As you can see here, this picture is actually one of the better spots in that field, but overall, I say the emergence has been very poor. Planting on June 7th just because there was no rain from June 7th to June 25th. So, but yeah, I say overall stuff that was planted in first couple weeks of May looked good, all things considering. The rains the last 3 weeks have really helped out and sped things along. So yeah, overall considering the dry June, I think things look okay.
Thank you. Yeah, the same test here, same result. So I mean, April and May plant dates look pretty good and they're getting into those pod stages depending on the maturity group. And the June plant date is just terrible because it didn't get a good emergence. It didn't get herbicides activated. It's just a mess. And so I think that's kind of a good summary of what's going on elsewhere as well. But we even tried to irrigate the field to get some better germination, and it just wasn't there. But Dr. Chappell, I guess you could talk more about that and everything else we've been seeing here.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, it, like everyone else, dry. Until about, well, it was 2 weeks ago, it started raining. Now it won't stop, which is not a bad thing. Just kind of back up a little bit, give you a little information about Tidewater AREC, because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Tidewater AREC. Right now we have 8 faculty members here at Tidewater AREC. We span pretty much every discipline except for weed science. That's why we rely on Dr. Flessner a great deal. We have a new faculty member here at Tidewater AREC who will be starting on August 10th. His name is Tim Bryant. He will be our extension entomologist in charge of all of the field crops that we grow here. We primarily focus on peanut, cotton, soybean, small grains, cover crops, corn. So that gives you an idea of the crop diversity that we have here. We also worked with some specialty crops as well. Dr. Langston has worked with vegetable crops in the past. Dr. Maria Belota, who's our crop physiologist, has worked with sorghum. Right now, she's working with faba beans. But at Tidewater AREC, we're about 406 acres of cropland that is pretty much continuously in production. So we're a very diversified farm. We try our best to serve the stakeholders in the area. We work with most of the commodity boards in the commodities that we serve. Kind of to back up a little bit to what Carrie was saying with the weather and such, you know, we've had a very dry June, late May into June, which really hampered a lot of the crops. We've had a bit of rain, or a good bit of rain, here in the last 2 weeks, which has pushed things along. Our peanuts are a little bit behind. Soybeans are still a little bit behind, but catching up pretty quick. One thing I'd like to touch on as far as our events, we have a field day event coming up on August 16th. That's our cotton field day event. We also cover peanuts in that. Dr. Tim Bryant, who, like I said, is our incoming extension entomologist, will be part of that field day event. So if anybody would like to attend that, it's actually, the registration can be done through the Tidewater AREC website. The Virginia Cotton Board will be part of that, and I welcome you all to attend.
All right, thanks, Dr. Chappell. Does anyone else have anything else they want to share from throughout the state? What are we seeing, and any questions?
I do have a couple comments, questions. Everybody talked about drought, so drought disaster designations are in various stages across the state. So based on the map that Carrie showed, some of those counties in D3, they'll get an automatic drought disaster designation next week from USDA. And then we met this week for Prince George and Sussex and Southampton, and I think Dinwiddie's probably talked about it. So pretty much everybody's going to go with corn. We figure we got at least a 30% loss. Most people have 50% or more loss. I went to Blacksburg this week by way of Campbell and Pittsylvania counties through Chatham, and I mean, they got some 90% lost corn. I mean, there's probably 100. It's not going to be any years on it. So there's always somebody got it worse than you do. That's what I've noticed. So we've had a right good spill. We've probably got some areas that have had 8 or 9 inches of rain since last Friday when it started. So yeah, so anywhere from 2 inches to probably 9. Corn's done. Everything else looks decent. We replanted some soybeans this week. It finally rained. So double crop beans that didn't come up. I mean, there were some planted. I guess it's better than bare ground. Planted them Tuesday. They're cracking this morning already. So plenty of moisture, and 100 degrees, they'll come up in 3 days. So the question I had, I don't know if it's Olga or Nicholas, about wheat OVT trials and barley OVTs. You know, can we expect that anytime soon? Not a whole lot of interest in wheat at $4.50 for feed wheat, and I hear Manel at Roanoke's quit buying Virginia wheat. So not a tremendous amount, but those guys that are growing wheat, they do rely on that OVT information. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I finished the summaries and sent out to the company. I mean, I'm not VCE, so I was going to try to get that done, but that traditionally that has been the grains extension specialists responsibility to get that report out, both to run the trials and to get the report out. But I put it together this year. I'd be happy to share that. I guess I should ask Lee to put it on the VPGA website, like what we have right now. I'd be happy to send that out to you right now, and can Scott, so that you can send to whoever you need. But we need to get it posted online. I just got a lot of other things going on is really what it is. But yeah, the summaries have been done. At least the 1 years have. So
Yeah, that's fine. We just, last year it was kind of haphazard. So
yeah, well, we got it done, but then the problem is that VCE changed the way that they accept publications. And so traditionally this was published through VCE, but what was happening was it was taking a very long time to get through the system, and they had very specific guidelines that they wanted me to follow. And I mean, to be honest, it just, I mean, the problem was we didn't have anyone in that position for 2 years, right? And then now we got someone in that position now, but she's brand new, and I mean, I'm spread so thin. I don't even have a field technician. I've spent most of the year, running a tractor and a combine. Anyway, I'll get it done.
yeah, well, I mean, no, long as we get some of that data. Yeah, I know it's been some holes in there, and you don't have to tell me about the publication process.
Yeah, in fact, we're not going to do it that way anymore. I mean, we'll publish a document at some point, but I guess the review process has been taking a really long time, and we finished cutting all the locations probably, I don't know, last week of June, and then you got to get all of the data put together and so on and so forth, and then analyzed and quality controlled, and then by the time you get there, they usually want, and especially the people who put entries in, usually want that as soon as possible. So I think I sent it out July 9th, something like that. Yeah. So we'll get it out there. We're gonna put it, I think for now, we're gonna put it on VPGA's website. They seem to have the capacity to do that. And then eventually it's gonna be on Medius, right, Joseph?
Yeah, and I'll just add, I put it on a Google. I put your summary on a Google Drive the other day because I had a few folks call and ask for it. So I might just put that link in the chat here for you, Scott. So until it gets posted somewhere else, yes, there. So and that summary came from you, Nick. So.
Yeah, thanks. I'll email Lee right now and see if she can't get it up on the VPGA website. I think they seem to be doing a good job with that. I don't think I'm gonna have a problem with that. Or if I do, I will I'll beg forgiveness later.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the publication side of it, but most of the time in August, that's when growers start thinking about it, and dealers start. I mean, they probably haven't even priced wheat yet, but usually in August, that's when we start getting questions about varieties. So,
Scott, to add to that, the on-farm trials, that should be available Monday of next week. I got the last location data this week, so I should have that released on Monday of next week. So that'll go in tandem with what Nick had.
I hate to add something, but I'm going to put Carrie on the spot as our new soybean specialist. So what's your prediction, as well as David and Mark, looking forward? You see the 14-day weather outlook, looks like a lot of rain coming pretty much in the eastern part of the state. So what should folks be looking for?
Yeah, so I was out with Nathan in Chesapeake on Tuesday, and we had some farmers tell us that they had gotten up to 11 inches of rain over last weekend, just last weekend alone. And yet it was, I mean, the Jeep Patriot had no problem driving in that soil. So I mean, it wasn't even waterlogged at all. So I think we're trying to, we're catching up with some of the rains and looking forward. I think the big hitters for mid-season management's going to be spraying if they're choosing to spray a fungicide. We're entering that R3 window, in the next little while here, and then looking at insects too. So I need to double check before I can say the wrong thing, but Sean Malone was telling me that they have been seeing corn earworm moth captures go up quite a bit. So that's something we need to be looking for. North Carolina confirmed them last week or the week prior. And so that's something we need to be looking for pretty soon here. So kind of, mid-season is going to be some of the nutrient deficiencies that Dr. Ryder talked about. And I would say if we're spraying a fungicide, we're coming up on that time and scouting pretty well for insects. Those are my biggest concerns. What do you got?
I mean, I echo what Gary said on the fungicides. I'm generally not a major proponent of spraying fungicides on soybeans, but from time to time I do see a yield bump. We've got a lot of varieties out there that have pretty good frog eye resistance, and I would focus more on some of the ones that don't have good frog eye resistance. With the rain and the leaf wetness we've had, certainly, it's a higher risk for frog eye leaf spot. But, if you've got resistant varieties, it might be, saving a spray might be something, you can do. But I haven't seen any frog eye. I know we saw some frog eye leaf spot last year pretty early. I have not seen any yet this year.
All right. Well, thank you. If anything else, I guess I'll give, 30 seconds or so, but we're coming up on the hour. So I'm going to try and cut us off in the next few minutes here. So any last questions, we'll go ahead. If not, I put the survey in the chat again. I'm hoping to get some feedback as far as if this was helpful, what was helpful about it, and how we can do this better in the future, if it's something worthwhile. So please do take that survey. And I'll be looking for those responses and trying to adjust accordingly. So I will be looking for that feedback if you've got anything to share. Other than that, thank you all very much for joining. I know this is something new and hopefully it was helpful. I learned something. So thank you all very much for sharing and asking questions, and look forward to working with y'all in the future. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Take
Thanks,
care,
guys.
everyone.